On February 26, 2026, diplomatic negotiators in Geneva reached an agreement with Iran. Tehran conceded to a zero accumulation pledge, agreeing to halt the stockpiling of highly enriched nuclear material and allow the unconditional return of international inspectors. Less than 48 hours later, the United States walked away from the table. On February 28, the U.S. launched Operation Epic Fury, executing 900 distinct strikes in the first 12 hours, hitting over 3,000 targets and neutralizing an estimated 60% of Iran's mobile ballistic missile launchers. The architects of this operation calculated that an overwhelming application of kinetic force, including a successful decapitation strike against Iran's senior leadership, would induce rapid regime collapse and permanently eliminate the country's nuclear program. That assumption failed. Instead of securing a unipolar deterrence, the decapitation strike immediately catalyzed a multi-domain regional war of attrition, executing a massive preemptive military campaign without accounting for the tightly woven nature of modern geopolitics, guaranteed a cascading disaster across global systems. To dissect exactly how this operation unraveled, we have to map the mechanical feedback loops triggered by the initial February 28 strikes. The first vector of analysis tracks the integration of artificial intelligence into the military kill chain, which collapsed adherence to international humanitarian law. The second feedback loop follows the resulting asymmetric economic blockade of global shipping channels. The final vector examines the nuclear succession paradox, tracing how the strikes forced the physical dispersal of highly enriched fissile material into shadow networks. Tracing these vectors shows how a military output in one specific domain acts as a highly destructive, unstoppable input across civilian and financial systems. We begin by examining the military reality on the ground during the opening 12 hours. Executing 900 distinct strikes in a single night required removing human deliberation from the targeting process. This velocity was achieved through the Joint All-Domain Command and Control Framework, or JDAD-2, a Defense Department initiative designed to connect sensors from all military branches into a single cloud-based network. Operating within Palantir's Maven system, an LLM called Claude autonomously synthesized raw drone feeds and intercepted communications to recommend strike coordinates. An LLM, or large language model, is an artificial intelligence program trained on massive datasets to recognize patterns and generate analytical outputs. By offloading cognition to the machine, the military compressed the traditional kill chain from days of human review to a matter of minutes. Concurrently, Israel deployed its own triad of proprietary AI systems. They utilized the Gospel to rapidly select structural targets and a database called Lavender to scrape mass surveillance data and profile individuals for assassination. Lavender operates with a known false positive error rate of 10%. This dictates that 1 in 10 individuals targeted for death by the algorithm is mathematically guaranteed to be innocent. The final component of this triad is a geolocation tracking algorithm called Where's Daddy? This program specifically monitors flagged individuals and delays strike authorization until the target returns to their private family home at night, ensuring civilian casualties among family members and neighbors. By compressing decision-making to algorithmic speeds and explicitly targeting civilian residences, the coalition rendered international humanitarian law principles of distinction and proportionality completely obsolete. The physical consequence of this algorithmic acceleration occurred on the morning of February 28, when missiles struck the Shajareh Tayyeba Girls' Elementary School in the southern Iranian city of Minab. Initial statements from the White House suggested the explosion was the result of an errant Iranian missile. Independent forensic analysis quickly proved otherwise. Armament researchers analyzed the projectile's video footage, identifying a U.S. Tomahawk cruise missile by its distinct flight profile and lack of an external rear engine. The massacre was the direct result of an AI spatial mapping failure. The school was originally built inside an Iranian military base, but had been physically walled off for civilian use since 2013. The targeting AI relied on outdated spatial datasets that still categorize the coordinates as a military installation, executing a technically flawless strike on a legally protected target. Human operators failed to catch the error because they were legally shielded by a military framework known as the Dahiya Doctrine. This strategy pre-authorized staggering collateral damage estimates, allowing operators to legally accept the deaths of up to 100 civilians to eliminate a single senior commander. The Minob school strike demonstrates that when autonomous systems generate targets using outdated data and human operators are shielded by doctrines of collective punishment, mass civilian casualties become not just a possibility, but a programmed certainty. Now we examine the macroeconomic feedback loop. During the opening bombardment, U.S. forces sank or severely damaged over 50 Iranian naval vessels, completely neutralizing Iran's conventional blue water naval capacity. Stripped of its fleet, Iran pivoted to an asymmetric strategy to control the Strait of Hormuz, drone swarms. This credible threat of violence immediately fractured the maritime financial architecture. Protection and indemnity insurers, or P&I clubs, which are mutual insurance associations that provide liability cover for open ocean ship owners, withdrew coverage for the region. This chart illustrates the financial mechanism of the blockade. As war risk premiums spiked 12-fold, adding hundreds of thousands of dollars per voyage, commercial shipping traffic through the strait plummeted by 80%. The result was an instant functional closure of a 21-mile-wide maritime artery that typically handles 20% of the global seaborne oil supply. Iran demonstrated that a state does not require a physical armada to close a maritime choke point. They enacted a full physical blockade by weaponizing global financial risk models. The shockwave of this blockade quickly spread to neighboring states. The Strait of Hormuz is the sole maritime exit for Qatar, a nation that provides 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas. Following drone strikes near its industrial zones, state-owned Qatar Energy halted production and declared force majeure to its global buyers. This legal maneuver instantly removed up to 110 billion cubic meters of annual supply from the market, causing global gas prices to spike. Choking off petrochemical feedstocks transferred the crisis directly into the agricultural sector. Global urea fertilizer prices surged across Asia and the Middle East, locking in severe global food inflation. This predictable chain reaction raises a specific question. Why would state actors initiate a military campaign that guaranteed immense damage to their own economies? The answer lies outside secular geopolitics. In the United States, the military posture was shaped heavily by the Department of War, where leadership explicitly framed the conflict through the lens of Christian nationalism and as a modern civilizational crusade. This aligned directly with extremist religious Zionist movements in Israel, aiming to rebuild the Third Temple. That theological objective required the ashes of a flawless red heifer for purification rituals. The subsequent importation of pure red Angus heifers from Texas was observed by regional proxy groups and explicitly cited by Hamas as a primary provocation for earlier violence. Standard geopolitical models failed to anticipate this conflict because they assume state actors make rational, economically driven decisions. They completely missed the apocalyptic, theological ambitions that provided the actual catalyst for war. Finally, we have to evaluate the operation against its core stated objective, the total elimination of Iran's nuclear threat. Prior to the hostilities, the International Atomic Energy Agency maintained continuity of oversight, verifying that Iran possessed approximately 440 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. Following the U.S. air campaign, intelligence confirmed that slightly over 200 kilograms of this material survived intact, secured inside subterranean chambers at the Isfahan facility, buried far too deep for conventional bunker-busting munitions to destroy. More critically, the strikes shattered all international oversight mechanisms. Taking advantage of the chaos, Iran dispersed the remaining 240 kilograms of highly enriched uranium into unverified shadow facilities. The kinetic bombing campaign did not destroy the nuclear material. It blinded international inspectors and forced the fissile stockpile into highly classified, untraceable networks. Simultaneously, the decapitation strike removed a critical political restraint. The assassination of the supreme leader voided the 2003 religious fatwa that strictly prohibited the manufacture of nuclear weapons. With its conventional military infrastructure in ruins, the surviving hardline regime views the rapid assembly of a 90% weapons-grade device as its only remaining deterrent against a U.S. ground invasion. When you map out the entirety of this conflict, the structural failure is obvious. The initial application of force triggered an uncontrollable contagion that bled across the algorithmic, economic, and nuclear domains simultaneously. All of this must be weighed against the reality of February 26th, when a diplomatically negotiated agreement to halt nuclear accumulation was already on the table. By prioritizing a kinetic decapitation strike over diplomacy, Operation Epic Fury traded a negotiated non-proliferation agreement for a paralyzed global economy, the normalization of automated war crimes, and an existential imperative for Iran to build a nuclear bomb.